Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal after the birth of Daisy, Sasha felt an overwhelming sense of hope. The joy of having a daughter, a new life to care for, seemed like a fresh start. But, ironically, that very hope began to unravel the fragile fabric of her mental state. The pain of losing her son, Liam, had never fully left her, and it was a wound that seemed to refuse to heal. The devastating loss shattered her in ways that she never anticipated. The agony of losing him, coupled with the guilt and self-blame, turned her into someone she barely recognized. Sasha couldn't shake the feeling that she had failed Liam, and now, the weight of that failure was beginning to destroy her ability to fully care for Daisy. Though Daisy was the one bright light in Sasha's life, her arrival only intensified the sense of vulnerability and paranoia that had begun to take root in her mind. Sasha's obsession with ensuring Daisy's safety grew each day, to the point that it consumed her. She began to feel as though someone, anyone, could be a threat to Daisy. Each time someone came near her or the baby, the sensation of being watched or followed grew stronger. It wasn't just the typical postpartum anxieties that most new mothers experienced, this felt more sinister, more invasive, like someone was lurking in the shadows, waiting to harm her or her child. Despite her best efforts to stay strong and keep her fears at bay, Sasha's mind was slipping further and further into the grip of postpartum delusions. She saw danger everywhere, and nothing felt safe. At night, the house creaked, and the darkness outside seemed to hold countless threats. The shadows, the people who passed by, even the smallest of noises became magnified in her tortured mind. She started to isolate herself from those who cared about her, too afraid to trust anyone, too afraid to admit how deeply she was spiraling. She couldn't even recognize the woman she had become. But Sasha's paranoia was not just a result of the typical stresses new mothers face. It was deeper, darker, and it was being manipulated. Unbeknownst to her, Drew, someone she trusted deeply, had been pulling the strings behind her unraveling mental state. Drew had seen an opportunity, and he took it. Sasha's emotional fragility became the perfect tool for him to exploit. He began to subtly tamper with the things she used, the medication she took, the food she consumed, lacing them with substances that exacerbated her condition. Sasha had no idea that the things she thought were helping her get by were actually pushing her closer to the edge. She had no idea that her worst fears were being fabricated, and her paranoia was being fed by someone she had always considered a friend, a confidant. Drew's actions were calculated, and his motives were rooted in something far more sinister than Sasha could ever have imagined. He had his own agenda, and to achieve his goals, he was willing to push Sasha to the brink of insanity. The truth was, he was trying to destabilize her, to turn her into a tool that could be easily controlled, making her incapable of caring for Daisy and perhaps even forcing her into a mental breakdown. As Sasha fell deeper into this abyss, Drew watched, knowing exactly what he was doing to her mind, to her soul. When Michael discovered the truth, everything changed. His world, which had already been rocked by the chaos around him, shattered completely. He had trusted Drew, and Drew had betrayed him in the worst possible way. To learn that Drew was the one responsible for Sasha's unraveling, the one who had been manipulating her, was more than Michael could bear. His anger ignited like a firestorm. Michael had always been fiercely protective of his family, but this crossed a line that he could not ignore. Drew had taken advantage of Sasha's vulnerability, and in doing so, he had put Daisy's safety in jeopardy. Michael couldn't let that stand. Sasha's mental state had already been fragile, but now it was clear to Michael that Drew had taken it to the extreme. It wasn't just the manipulation that enraged him. It was the fact that Drew had done it to someone he loved. Someone he considered a part of his family. Michael's protectiveness of Daisy, his daughter, whom he loved with all his heart, pushed him into a state of fury. No one would be allowed to hurt his family, not while he was still standing. He made a decision then and there, he would make Drew pay for what he had done. But revenge wasn't going to be easy. Drew had played his game well, and now Michael had to figure out a way to expose him without further endangering Sasha or Daisy. The situation was more complicated than just confronting Drew. Sasha's paranoia and deteriorating mental state meant that any rash move could cause her to spiral even further, and Michael couldn't risk that. Jason and Felicia, two people Michael trusted implicitly, stepped in to help. Jason, always loyal to Michael, knew that this was not a fight that could be won by brute force alone. Drew's manipulation was psychological, and Michael had to outsmart him. Felicia, with her sharp instincts and maternal care, understood the depths of Sasha's mental struggles. Together, they devised a plan to protect Daisy, but also to help Sasha. Jason would keep a close eye on Drew, watching his every move, while Felicia worked on gaining Sasha's trust again, helping her navigate the shadows that Drew had created in her mind. But as the days passed, Michael's anger did not subside. He was determined to take Drew down, not just for what he had done to Sasha, but for everything he had stolen from Michael's family. The knowledge that Drew was the true enemy, playing a dangerous game of manipulation and deceit, fueled Michael's resolve. However, the road ahead was uncertain, and the cost of getting justice would not come without its own set of sacrifices. Michael had to decide how far he was willing to go to protect his family and whether his thirst for revenge would destroy the very thing he sought to protect. The situation was becoming more and more precarious, and Michael knew that every move he made had to be calculated. The fight to reclaim his family's peace, to reclaim Daisy's safety, would be a long and difficult one. But one thing was certain, no matter what it took, Michael would not let Drew get away with it. At this critical juncture, Jason and Felicia had taken it upon themselves to assist Michael. As Daisy's godparents, they understood the gravity of their responsibility and the importance of protecting the little girl from any danger that might threaten her safety. Jason, a seasoned warrior from the criminal underworld, was no stranger to the kind of threats that Drew posed. His years of experience navigating a world filled with danger had honed his instincts, and he was more than capable of dealing with anyone who dared to harm his family. Drew, with his manipulation of Sasha and his dark motives, was now a threat that Michael could not afford to let continue. Jason knew that the stakes were far too high. He couldn't allow Drew to continue weaving his web of deceit and manipulation around the people he loved most. Carly, as a mother, understood better than anyone the dangers that Drew posed. Her fierce instinct to protect her family, particularly Daisy, had been triggered, and yet she found herself in a delicate position. While her protective nature made it difficult for her to back down, she also understood the necessity of Jason and Felicia's involvement. The situation was dire, and Carly had to concede that Michael's decision to trust Jason and Felicia was the right one. Still, she couldn't shake the fear that, in their pursuit of Drew, they might inadvertently put Daisy in harm's way. The idea of anyone coming close to causing Daisy harm sent waves of anxiety through Carly, but she knew that Jason and Felicia were doing everything they could to ensure her safety, even if it meant confronting Drew head-on. Felicia, with her years of experience defending her own family, was resolute in her determination to protect Daisy. She had raised her own daughter, Maxie, and had long been the guardian of many in her family, so the stakes of this battle were clear to her. Daisy wasn't just a godchild, she was a part of her family, and Felicia was not about to let anyone, especially Drew, jeopardize her safety. Felicia's unwavering determination and decisiveness had become a source of strength for the entire family. Her presence, combined with Jason's strategic mindset, gave Michael the stability he needed to take action. However, the situation was far from simple. The complexities of the situation were made even more difficult by the fact that there were more dangers lurking in the shadows. Drew, though the primary threat, was not the only one with the capacity to bring chaos into their lives. There were larger, more dangerous forces at play, ones that Sasha, in her fragile mental state, had not fully comprehended. The threats against Daisy were not just from Drew, but from a web of conspiracy and manipulation that could extend far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Jason, who had dealt with the criminal underworld for so long, knew that the real danger could come from places they least expected. There were too many unknowns, and it was these uncertainties that made the situation so perilous. As the tension mounted, Michael found himself in a position where he could no longer ignore the rage boiling inside him. His anger toward Drew was palpable, but it wasn't just the betrayal that had ignited it, it was the realization that Drew had manipulated the woman he loved and threatened the safety of his daughter. The betrayal was one thing, but the idea that Drew had turned Sasha into a pawn in his game was something Michael could not forgive. The thought of Drew using Sasha's mental state to further his own twisted agenda was more than Michael could bear. But as the situation escalated, Michael found himself at a crossroads. Could he control his emotions, or would his thirst for revenge overtake him? The line between justice and vengeance began to blur. Michael knew that, to protect Daisy and restore some semblance of peace, he had to remain clear-headed. But with the weight of everything on his shoulders, the question remained. Could he prevent his anger from clouding his judgment? Could he maintain control long enough to stop Drew from hurting anyone else, or would his desire for payback drive him to take actions he would later regret? More troubling still was the question of Drew's true connections. Michael had already suspected that Drew wasn't operating alone, but now the stakes were even higher. Was Drew simply a pawn in a larger scheme, or was he the mastermind behind everything that had happened? Michael began to wonder if the pain Sasha was enduring, the turmoil in their lives, and the dangers looming over Daisy were all the result of a much larger conspiracy. Was Drew just one part of a much more insidious plot? And what role did he truly play in all of this? As secrets continued to unravel and more truths came to light, the tension within the family grew. The walls that had once kept them united began to show cracks, as doubt and suspicion crept into their hearts. Jason, Felicia, and Michael were working tirelessly to protect Daisy, but even they were left wondering, how deep did the betrayal go? And how much more would they have to sacrifice to ensure that Daisy was safe from harm? The weight of these decisions began to take its toll. As Michael struggled with the balance between justice and vengeance, he had to also navigate the complexities of family loyalty and trust. The lines between right and wrong were becoming increasingly difficult to discern. With each passing day, the stakes grew higher, and the consequences of their actions became more severe. In the end, Michael had to decide whether his personal anger and desire for retribution would cloud his judgment, or whether he could rise above it all and put Daisy's safety first. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain, Michael would do whatever it took to protect his family. And whatever secrets still lay hidden, Michael would uncover them, no matter the cost. Alongside Jason and Felicia, Michael had poured every ounce of his strength into protecting Daisy, but nothing about the situation was as simple as he had initially believed. What had begun as a battle to shield a helpless child from the dangers of her mother's spiraling mental state quickly escalated into something far darker and more complex. Daisy was no longer just a beacon of hope for Michael, she had become the focal point of an ongoing, relentless war against sinister forces. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, and every move made to protect her felt like stepping deeper into a shadowy abyss. Sasha's increasing descent into paranoia only made the situation more precarious. The woman who had once been the center of Michael's world was now barely recognizable. Her mind, fractured by grief and trauma, had become a breeding ground for the terrifying delusions that were slowly consuming her. Each day, her grip on reality seemed to loosen further, and each night, Michael lay awake wondering how much longer she could hold it together before she completely shattered. The thought of Daisy being left in Sasha's care, especially in her current mental state, was more terrifying than any enemy he had ever faced. Yet, Michael couldn't bring himself to turn his back on her completely. She was still the mother of his daughter, and he had a responsibility to ensure Daisy's safety, even if it meant confronting the woman he loved in ways he never imagined he would have to. But no matter how much Michael tried to shield Daisy, Drew's presence loomed like a constant threat, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Drew was no longer just a manipulative figure in their lives, he had become a direct threat to the stability of everything Michael held dear. The resentment between them had been brewing for years, and now it had reached a boiling point. Every time Michael tried to calm the storm, Drew pushed him closer to the edge. His constant efforts to provoke Michael, both emotionally and psychologically, kept him on a knife's edge. Drew seemed to take pleasure in tormenting Michael, always knowing just how to hit where it hurt most. The games Drew played were not just about power, they were about control. Drew wanted to break Michael, to tear him down until he was nothing more than a shadow of the man he once was. And with each encounter, Michael felt himself slipping further into the trap that Drew had set. The tension continued to escalate, culminating in the shocking disappearance of Sasha. At first, Michael thought she might have simply gone off to escape the overwhelming pressure, but it soon became clear that her vanishing was part of something far more insidious. It was no longer just a case of a woman struggling with mental health issues. Sasha's disappearance was now part of a larger, far-reaching conspiracy. Drew couldn't possibly be the only one involved in this scheme, someone else had to be pulling the strings. Someone far more dangerous, someone whose influence reached deeper than Michael had ever anticipated. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that they were up against something far more complex than a simple betrayal. Jason and Felicia, always loyal and steadfast in their support of Michael, were more determined than ever to protect Daisy, but they knew the challenge was going to be even more daunting than they had initially thought. As Daisy's godparents, they understood that their role was not just to care for her but to shield her from every possible threat. But what they hadn't expected was the depth of the conspiracy surrounding Sasha's disappearance. Every lead they followed seemed to take them deeper into a labyrinth of lies and deception. The very people they thought they could trust were now potential enemies, and the stakes for Daisy's safety were higher than ever. Could they truly keep her safe in a world that seemed to be conspiring against her at every turn? The challenges they faced were not just external, they were internal as well. Every decision they made, every action they took, was fraught with risk. Jason, a man used to fighting battles in the shadows of the criminal world, was now facing a fight that was deeply personal. His ability to protect the people he loved had always been his greatest strength, but now, he had to navigate a world where the lines between right and wrong were becoming increasingly blurred. His usual tactics, force and intimidation, would not work here. This battle was more psychological than physical, and that made it all the more dangerous. Felicia, on the other hand, had always been the calm in the storm, the voice of reason when the world felt out of control. But even she had her doubts. As a mother and grandmother, her instincts told her that Daisy's safety was in jeopardy, but she also knew that their efforts to protect her were being thwarted by forces they didn't fully understand. The more she learned about Sasha's mental state, the more she realized that Sasha might not even be fully aware of the danger she was in. Could they really save her, or was it already too late? As the days passed, Michael became more and more consumed by the need to protect his daughter. His rage toward Drew simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. But his anger wasn't just about revenge, it was about protecting Daisy from a fate worse than death. The questions that plagued Michael's mind were becoming unbearable. Was Drew really the mastermind behind everything, or was there someone else manipulating the situation from the shadows? Could they trust anyone, or was every ally a potential traitor? And most importantly, how could Michael protect Daisy when the enemy was not just Drew, but a whole network of deceit that ran deeper than he could have ever imagined? The battle to protect his family, his daughter, had only just begun, and the road ahead was anything but clear. As the conspiracy around Sasha's disappearance unraveled, Michael found himself standing at a crossroads. Would he continue to fight with everything he had, risking everything in the process, or would he finally be forced to confront the darker truths lurking behind the scenes? The war for Daisy's safety had begun, and it was a battle that would test the very core of who Michael was. Every move mattered. Every decision could change everything. And with every secret revealed, the fight for his family's future became more intense and more complicated. As the web of deceit continues to tighten around Michael, Jason, and Felicia, the battle for Daisy's safety becomes more treacherous with each passing day. What began as a simple act of protection has evolved into a relentless war, where the lines between family loyalty, vengeance, and survival are increasingly blurred. Sasha's unraveling mind, Drew's manipulation, and the ever-present threat of unseen enemies have turned what should have been a peaceful period of healing into a desperate struggle for control. Michael's fury drives him forward, but it is tempered by the knowledge that he must make choices that will define his family's future. Every decision carries weight, and every misstep could cost them everything. As he and his family face a future filled with uncertainty, the question remains: how much are they willing to sacrifice to keep Daisy safe? Will Michael's need for retribution cloud his judgment, or will he find a way to protect his loved ones without losing himself in the process? With secrets still lurking in the shadows and the true mastermind behind Sasha's disappearance yet to be revealed, the path forward is fraught with danger.